seats.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the budget breakfast. It's a two for today, so we have the Provincial and Federal Budgets being presented. And this is being put on by the Northumberland Central Chamber of Commerce and the Port Hope and District Chamber of Commerce.
Hi everybody, I'm Bree Nixon, manager of the Port Hope and District Chamber of Commerce, and this handsome gentleman is Chris Pelche, who is the committee chair for all the fun events and a board of director member at the Northumberland Central Chamber. And I just want to say that this is really exciting. I don't know if the chambers have ever had a provincial and federal budget breakfast on the same day, so we're making history, folks. Very exciting. Anyway, without further ado, because we did want to get started promptly at 7:30, we'd just like to thank you all for joining us.
Yes.
And I will, and I was going to say, we have the pleasure of introducing the first guest.
Yes. Well, we have our MPP for Northumberland Quinte West, Rinaldi.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the Chamber for doing this. And thanks for, in such a short notice, to let us intrude on already planned budget meeting with Rick in the federal budget. It's one of those things that I know you're all busy, and so actually having one together is not such a bad thing after all. And thanks for the Chamber, really. I mean, I have a special spot for Chamber of Commerce. I was one of the founding members of the Brighton District Chamber of Commerce way back, not too long ago, but way back when. So I know the work that you do, and doing things like this is helpful for government to spread their message. I'm going to apologize off at the beginning. I do have another one of these, so I'm going to be well fed when the day is over in Brighton, just shortly after 9:30. So if you see me walking out, it's not that I am trying to get away from anybody's comments, but it's one of those things that we try to get the message out as quickly as we can to as many people as we can. And failing the fact that you might not get your questions answered today or asked today, you know where our offices are, and please feel free to give us a call. There's a number of literature that some on the table, some outside. Please take one. So, our budget of last night, if I'm a bit woozy, I didn't get home till about 10:30, and you try to absorb everything in about 2 hours or so. Or I guess there's a few planks that I just want to mention, and then I'd like to hear from you, I guess. One is we set a path last year. As you know, the budget wasn't successful the first time around. That's 2014 budget, but then we had an election, and people of Ontario spoke. So we took basically our budget and made it into a platform, and people had an opportunity to make some choices. So a few of the planks of the budget that really it's a continuation of the road that we had laid out in last year's budget. So infrastructure is a centerpiece of our budget. We know there's a humongous shortage of infrastructure renewal needed right across the province, not the least Northumberland Quinte West. And we've committed some $31.5 billion over the next 10 years strictly for transit, roads and bridges, about $16 billion within the Greater Toronto-Hamilton area, and $15 billion outside of that area, so that we all have our fair share. So that's a commitment that we made to make sure that we can keep, public transit. If anybody's driven around the Toronto area lately, you know what it's like. I know I do it way more than I want to do it, but it's part of what I do. And then, of course, I hear from local municipalities here that the huge amount of infrastructure need. So I'm going to touch where the money is coming from for that a bit in a couple of minutes. The other piece that I want to talk to you about is businesses, regardless of what size, are the core of our economy. Because without businesses, we don't have jobs, and without jobs, We don't have much of an economy. So we're recommitted to the path that we have set for the next 10 years as a $2 billion fund, prosperity fund to help businesses. You've heard of Eastern Ontario Development Fund, you heard of the RED program and other programs to help industry, either bring industry into the area or grow what we have. So, and it's working. The job recovery in Ontario is leading the way, and we think that that's the right path to go. So we just added another $200 million to the fund over the next 10 years to make sure that we keep the momentum going, and it's resonating very well. The other piece that I want to mention is the investment of some $250 million over the next 2 years for youth job strategy. We already had a commitment in the past. We know that our highest unemployment numbers across the province, and this year is no different, is kids come out of college, university, and sometimes, frankly, have a hard time finding a job. So we've increased our fund by the additional $250 million, so we almost doubled it to $565 million to try to either through entrepreneurship, where they be able to go into their own business, or find an appropriate job that they need to be able to be successful. So there's also, when we talk about the plank of a fair society in our community, we think that everybody in Ontario should have the same ability to work, live, play, and enjoy some of the things that we have. So we're increasing the Ontario Works and Ontario Disability by 1%. I know that sounds a lot, but it's been 1% every year for a little bit. But there's also, we're increasing some special circumstances when you're in OW or on disability, that there's some other pockets that we will help. There's some planks, there's some help for students to make OSAP a little bit more reachable and affordable. And I'll just use one example. If your son or daughter or you going to university and wanted to apply for OSAP and you had a car, that was an asset you had that you had to lower your qualification rate. We've taken that away because we know, especially when you're in rural Ontario, you probably have to travel. There's not a university in your backyard or a college. The other piece of the plank is that that there's no new taxes in this particular budget. Last year there were some new taxes to high age earners. I forget I think it was over 160,000 or somewhere there. They had an increase of about 2%. There is no new taxes. I just want to talk a little bit, which I'm sure you heard in the media in the last week or so, about the way we deal with alcohol. So the beer is the one that we're dealing with first, and starting sometimes this year, we're going to increase places where where access to beer. And one is it being grocery stores. The other piece is that we've expanded. Not that we expanded, we made it a lot more attractive for local breweries, for microbrewers to have their product in shelves, whether it's at the LCBO or the beer stores or at grocery stores, to some 20%. Microbrewers in Ontario produce employ about 1,000 people. They tell us from this move alone, that will double to about 2,000 people. And I think if we can have a product that's made right here locally on the shelf, I think we'll all benefit. The other piece you've heard of is the way Hydro One will operate down the road. I just want to make it very clear, Hydro One is not being sold. It's a new corporation that's being formed, and as soon as the IPO is ready and the transformations happen, I was going to say all of us can buy shares. I can't, because it's a conflict. But first, it'll be a public offering for the first 15% of Hydro One Corp assets, and then that will be assessed how well it's going. We anticipate, or experts anticipate, that it'll bring in somewhere between $6 to $9 billion once the transactions are complete. And that's part of the money that'll go into a special trust fund strictly for infrastructure I talked a minute ago. So that's part of the scenario. We are still on target to balance the budget by 17-18 through a number of measures. So asset sales will not go towards the balancing of the budget. Going back to the Hydro One restructuring and sale, it won't be, when I say it's not a sale, it's not another 407. The province will retain full control. There'll be a mechanism where board members will be appointed by the province, the chair will be appointed by the province, and the province has the right to fire and replace board members. The other piece to that part is that there'll be shareholders, and shareholders will hold the corporation accountable. So at the end of the day, we'll have a more effective operation. Now, there's a lot of other smaller detail in the budget that I haven't been able to go through a book that's this thick, but I'm sure if you need some bedtime reading, there's some out there. Please take one and have fun. So, chairs, I stop here. If there's some questions, please feel free. Just before I go there, I just wanted to, there's so much, right, to try to remember, and try to do that at 10 o'clock last night so that I'd be ready this morning. It's a bit challenging. ORP, Ontario Retirement Pension Plan. It's on track. We're building a mechanism to make that happen. We've had a lot of conversations with the Chamber of Commerce's during the past, and I know there's some challenges. Look, I've been self-employed all my life, a small business person, but I think it's something that it's a plan for the future. Yes, I won't see the benefit. Probably the majority of us here won't see any benefit. Some of them will, though. I see some younger faces here. But the reality of the day is we want to make sure that when people retire, have some sense of security, a committed security, that they don't have to worry where their next loaf of bread comes from. We're not talking about keep making anybody rich from a pension, but they're able to sustain themselves. And looking long term, the fact is that, you know, when people are at that level, you know, and the reality is they are at that level. They live day by day. If they get an extra dollar at the end of the month, they're going to spend it. Where are they going to spend it? Within their economy. So it'll be a cycle. And to have that opportunity, to have the cycle for those folks to have that extra dollar so that, and I know they will spend it, and we all know that they will spend it. I think it's good for the economy. But it is long-term planning. And I think what you see in our budget, it's not about today, it's not about tomorrow, it's about building a future down the road. Is it perfect? I would say, if it was perfect, we probably wouldn't be here today, or we wouldn't change it year by year. But it's a blueprint for the future. So, thank you for being so attentive. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Lou. So are there any questions for Mr. Rinaldi? Russ?
Hi, Lou. Russ Christensen. Ontario Hydro One brings in about $275 million in dividends per year for the Ontario taxpayer, which helps us pay for health care and public education, etc. Can you please tell me and explain to me how that return on investment is worth giving away? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. I went to business school. I deal with businesses all the time. A 10 to 11% return on investment per annum is a very attractive return, and I don't understand why you're selling it.
Well, first of all, I don't think you're paying attention. We're not selling it.
60%.
It's going to be well, Russ, if you want to have a debate, you and I'd be more than happy to do that. I'm not sure, but all I said is that a new corporation is being formed, shares will be available to the public. The province will retain full control. But to address your question about the revenue shortage, For example, just with the changes we make with beer, that's going to bring an extra $100 million a year to the coffers. We believe that when the new corporation is fully operational and it's going to return higher dividends to make up for some of the shortfall. Yes, what you're saying is correct. I'm not. What I'm saying is, I think with the changes we're making, not just looking at Hydro One, we're going to be able to regain that. I mean, you know, there's some folks out there that put a mortgage in the house they have so they can buy another piece of property, and that's basically what the province is doing. It's using its asset. It's using its assets better.
A mortgage is a loan.
Chair, I'll leave it up to you.
I did get a note here. The owner of a brown Sierra white Ford Ranger, you need to move it.
It's that simple.
It's white Ford Ranger
Or a brown Sierra.
and a brown Sierra?
Is it both?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll save your seat.
Lou, I just want to, Lou, I just want to say we were at this table making a bit of noise, and we apologize when you were speaking, but when you mentioned about the vehicles being taken out of the calculation for Ontario Student Assistance Program, as you know, I'm involved in post-secondary education, and living in a rural community, it was one of the biggest barriers for students, because if they owned a vehicle, it was counted as an asset. Well, if you live in a rural community, if you live in Cobourg and you're trying to commute to Durham or trying to commute to Loyalist, you have to have a car, and they were severely penalized, and it did stop some students from being able to go to post-secondary. So I have to say, I think that's one of the highlights for me. Thank you very much.
I think, and I'm just going to add to that, I sat in through the budget lockup, so there's some things that Lou hasn't.
I don't know about it. She knows more than
It was
I do.
the drive home, that's all he got, that's all the information I could share. The repayment is locked at $7,400, so I know my kids, who have all graduated from university, they were getting somewhere around $14,000 a year from OSAP that would have been repaid, but it is capped at $7,400. So even, you know, you can receive up to $15,000, you know, for a middle, and the income range has been raised a lot to qualify for that as well.
Linda.
I just wanted to ask if the Ontario Trail Foundation budget was approved for this year. Do you know what the funding was? The reason I ask is because Trail has been on hold since, you know, last November was their last intake, as they've done their redesign for their allocations. And, you know, we're going to have some information sessions next month here in Northumberland County with Trillium, so I just want to make sure they got their $125.
You know the big red book outside?
Yeah.
So, my understanding, programs such as that, programs like Eastern Ontario Development Fund, like the RED program, and those programs have not been touched. But, you know, I can't.
That's good. I'll check it.
I've had some questions from our members about carbon tax. Could you talk about the carbon tax a little bit?
So, yeah, a good point, and it was part of our budget. Although we're not, we're within the next 5 or 6 months, there'll be some major consultation across the province. And I'm not an expert at it, so bear with me if somebody knows more than I do, help me out here. So, look, we need to worry about our environment. You know, I'm part of a process where we're reviewing a bunch of, like the Green Belt and the Oak Ridges Moraine, as part of my responsibility to administer municipal affairs and housing. And at every session, we're having 16 sessions across the area. In fact, we had one in Cobourg here a couple of weeks ago. In every one of those sessions, environment comes up. That's a huge point. Once Ontario, we have our package together, and the package is not there, Bree, 75% of Canadians will be under some type of cap and trade, or what the other one now escapes me. So they'll be under some control to help control the environment. The cap and trade, to the best of my ability, it'll be in different sectors. It'll be an automotive sector, it'll be you know, some other sectors. And by the way, we have some cap and trade in Ontario, which was established by the previous government for, now who's a chemist here, NOx and SOx and all that kind of stuff. That's being controlled now through cap and trade. And the sky hasn't fallen in, frankly. But so the cap and trade, you know, we hear, I mean, the premier made a comment, there's gonna be probably some additional cost to gasoline somewhere down the road. But that money will be used to offset other, to help invest in other sectors, to offset, to better the environment, to offset that. For example, farmers are huge benefactors of cap and trade. As a matter of fact, the president of the OFA made that statement because they contribute to improving our climate change in a big way. The forestry industry, for example, in Northern Ontario, they're a huge benefactor because it's not so much from the trees that they cut, but from the trees that they plant. We are going to be, we have a commitment, it's part of our budget, if the budget goes through, which I suspect it will, cap and trade will move forward. We are designing the process, and I think in the coming months or weeks, you're going to hear a lot more where people are going to be able to have input on the design they want. We don't know yet if we're going to take a broad approach or we're going to go sector by sector. For example, we're going to use the automotive industry, the trucking industry, the agricultural industry. It'll be phased in. My understanding, we're probably going to try to phase it in sectors. But it's something that I think we need to start worrying. I mean, when we look at the floods we've been having in recent years, and you know, and some of those things, you know, as cold as this winter was, like February, we had one of the warmest, in North America in general, was one of the warmest winters. And that's scary. So, you know, I think, you know, this is where I guess it gets a little bit, for me, as a, you know, I'm not going to be around this world much longer, right, as you get on age. But I'm going to tell you a little story about, well, this past fall, I went to a Bulls game in Belleville, which I won't be able to go to anymore next year because I'm not going to be there, with my 9-year-old grandson. We're driving through Trenton, and there's Norampak, a paper processing plant right by the river in Trenton, and there's steam coming out of the stack, right? I call it steam. My grandson says, Granddad, what's all the smoke? I go, AJ, it's not smoke, it's steam. The car went silent, just me and him, and about, it felt like an hour later, but a few seconds later, he says, Granddad, I don't care what you call it, it's going up in the air, it's bad for the environment. So, you know, when we get 10-year-old kids talking about that, it makes the old grandpa think a little bit, what do I want to leave those kids? So, you know, places like China are doing cap and trade. California is leading in cap and trade. You know, Quebec has embarked, and we're trying to work with Quebec to just do that. I think at the end of the day, you know, Alberta is doing cap and trade. British Columbia, they have whatever they call it, but it's a similar.
It's a carbon tax.
Carbon tax, yes. Thanks, Russ. It shows the long day yesterday. Thank you. So I think we really need to, you know, there is a cost involved. You know, we talk about recycling. You know, I mean, if there's any, I guess there's no municipal politicians here, but they will tell you. I know I was there when we implemented recycling in Northumberland County. It's more expensive than just dumping the stuff in a hole. But I think, you know, we're making some huge progress and we need to do more. I know it's a long-winded question, I apologize. Sir?
Hello, you mentioned there was no new taxes.
Yes.
But if we bring in a pension plan, is that not a tax on the businesses?
Well, look, we can call it whatever we want to call it. Yes, there's a cost of business. I have a business as well. That tax, you know, when I look at taxes, it's money that goes to government. That money, just like the CPP, it goes to a dedicated fund for a pension. It's run independent of government, same as the CPP now, which is one of the best pension plans in the world, by the way. So all I'm saying is there's a cost to it, absolutely, both for business and individuals. That money does not go to government. It goes to a pension fund that, you know, builds over the years, similar. And, you know, the ORPP, Ontario Pension Retirement Plan, it's going to be modeled very, very closely to the CPP. So if someday there should be, thoughts of bringing the two together, that hopefully they'll mesh to the best of our ability.
We have a fund here we're spending $200 million in addition to what we've spent in previous years for creating jobs.
Yes.
If they leave the money with the businesses, we'll have more jobs created.
Well, they'll tell you, no offense to business folks, okay, but I'm gonna, if you know me, you'll hear what he thinks. Canada and Ontario, it's one of the places in the world where corporations really hoard a lot of money. They don't reinvest it, and I'm not making those numbers up. To answer your question about companies for investing, Ontario, for 3 years in a row, and we're going to get that report probably next week. It's one of the best places in North America to invest. Surpasses Texas and California. So we have one of the lowest, together with the federal government, we have one of the lowest corporate taxes in North America. So I think we need to look at the bigger picture. I get it, there's going to be a cost. The ORPP for anybody that has part-time employees under $3,500 payroll, there's no commitment to it.
And actually, that is all the time we have for questions. You know where to find me.
So on behalf of everybody here and the Port Hope Chamber and Northumberland Central Chamber, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come in and talk to us.
Very much. So how big is the check? Thank you very much. And we got time, a little bit of time.
And I just want to let everybody know that
Yeah, we'll be here. I want to see Rick's presentation. By 8:30 afternoon.
yes. Now the candidates in the upcoming federal election were invited to attend, and they're all here. And they have also been given the opportunity to set up some materials in the other room. So after everything, feel free to browse. So now, I'll leave it to Bree to introduce Michael.
All right, so everybody, we're going to serve breakfast as we're going through. Thanks for understanding. It's going to be a little bit noisy, but we will get through it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our MP, Rick Norlock, present the federal budget, and then we also have Michael Machon here from BDO Canada, who is going to present a non-political presentation of the budget. And then after both of those gentlemen present, we'll have the questions for the federal budget at the end. Now, we're doing our best to be finished by 8:30. We understand if people might have to get up and leave. If you have to, please do so quietly. But in the meantime, no worries, that's fine. Without further ado, I am very pleased to present MP Rick Norlock. Thanks for being here this morning, Rick.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you to the chambers for putting on this, my, I think, eighth or ninth budget. And it will be my last. Some people will be happy about that. Some people tell me they're sorry to see me go. But I can tell you there is one happy lady, and she's at home in Wartburg. And she's looking forward to be able to come with me and visit with our grandkids and see more of my country and the world around us. So thank you very much for being here. I know you were all very busy. This is the Chamber of Commerce. These folks here who put this event on each and every year do so because budgets are important to people who are in business. Budgets are important to all of us. And so we'll start off without further ado, just to give you some background. We're going to give a little bit of background. So if we go to slide number 2. Canada continues to lead other G7 countries in real GDP growth over the recovery. This has led to one of the best job creation performances in the G7. As a result, over 1.2 million net new jobs have been created, and the majority of these new jobs have been in full-time positions in high-wage private sector industries This data has been collected from 2009 to the last quarter of 2014. So we just, we'll go to the next. And this is the government has fulfilled its promise to return to balanced budget by 2015. And I see my two past, candidates are here. And we all promised that if we were elected, at some point near the 4th or 5th year of our term, we would balance our budget. In spite of these, if we could go back to that, just so people can, back to number 3. So we have here, in spite of the challenges, the government will return to balanced budget in 2015. Projected surplus is $1.4 billion in 15-16, rising to $4.8 billion by 2019-2020. They do not, of course, include the set aside for contingency, which starts at $1 billion and then grows to $3 billion. And we intend to enshrine in law the prudent approach to fiscal planning, including balanced budgets. Just as most of your businesses, you have to do some long-range planning, so does the government. Go to the debt as a share of GDP is expected to continue to decline, well on track towards our target of 25% by the year 2021. And I'll just let you read a little bit further, and I'll just end up by saying that the set aside for contingencies will continue to protect the fiscal outlook from global economic uncertainty, and if not required, will be used to reduce the level of federal debt. You will, of course, know that when we say the world is still, the economies of the world are still unstable, we know that the European Economic Community, the United States is winding down their debt, their quantitative easing. The European Economic Union actually just started theirs, and that's of course the printing of money to inject into their economies because their economies are sluggish, and we'll have a slide, a comparison slide in a moment. So controlling spending has been important for our balanced budgets. Okay, that's the problem with some of these. It was working last night. There we go. So our federal debt to GDP ratio, as I mentioned, is falling, is going to fall, because there are contingency funds, and we've done some long-range planning. This will ensure that Canada's total government net debt will remain the lowest of the GC7 countries. So just as an aside, the debt to GDP ratios on average in the OECD countries is somewhere around 80%, fluctuates between 40 to 80%, some are actually higher. Go to the next slide, please. So here we have allowing for investments in economic action plan. So the annual savings are expected to rise $19 billion by 2015. The government's return to balanced budgets has been achieved through tight control of spending, opposing tax loopholes. Ongoing savings achieved since budget 2010 rise to about $19 billion by 2015, including the annual ongoing savings of over $5 billion from the deficit reduction action plan. So, in this particular budget, one of the primary, of course, goals is reducing your small business tax rate. But you can't take that alone. You have to start from our first budget. In one of our first budgets, the budget of 2006, 2007, and 2010, we reduced the small business tax rate, which was approximately 13.2% for businesses earning $250,000. So what we did then is we reduced that rate to 11%, and we raised the limit of small business income to be able to enjoy a lower tax rate from other businesses up to $300,000. This tax rate, reduction in tax rates, which will end by 2019 at 2019 at 9% for businesses, as you can see, businesses earning $500,000. So you'll be able to, you're raising the rate at which you can get the lower tax rate. We're providing manufacturers with tax incentives for an additional 10 years to boost productivity, and we've been doing that over the last 5 budgets because the Canadian Manufacturers Association this is one of their budget asks, and when we hold our budget consultations, whenever we meet with Northumberland and Quinte Manufacturers Association, this is one of their constant asks. So now we're introducing that for the next 10 years. Of course, we know that Ontario, when we talk about the Canadian auto industry, we're referring primarily to the province of Ontario. That's where almost all of our auto industry is. We do have several funds, and we've added in the last slide you will have seen where we've now given incentives to companies who produce parts for automobiles because they're an intrinsic part of the auto industry. Canada still maintains approximately 17% of the North American auto production, so much so that about 85% of auto production in Canada is shipped to the United States, who is our partner. Creating jobs, we're investing $750 million over 2 years, starting in 2017-2018, and $1 billion per year on an ongoing basis for a new public transit fund for projects involving the private sector, including P3s. This is on top, of course, of our $75 billion already announced in infrastructure funding. I think it's important to mention, of course, at this particular time, the sharing of course, of revenue obtained from tax, and the gas tax fund, which for Northumberland, in the beginning, when we first took government, there was thanks to the previous government, there was a gas tax fund. It was to last approximately 3 to 4 years. What we did, because the association, because the provinces, and but in particular the municipalities, the Canadian municipalities asked that we make that fund permanent. So we did that, then we doubled it. In some of the most recent budgets, the Canadian Association of Municipalities asked us to put a COLA clause in there, in other words, to up with inflation. We've done that. And so it amounts, it's part of our plan. For Northumberland County, it amounts to about $2 million a year. So most of the improvements you've seen, or a lot of the improvements you've seen to the county roads are as a result of that. This comes directly out of the excise tax. When you go to the gas station and you see that little symbol on the side of the gas pumps, you'll see where the federal government has 10 cents a litre, has an excise tax of 10 cents a litre. That portion of the 10 cents a litre now amounts to 5 cents a litre. So we've taken 1/2 of that and we've given it right back to the municipalities. But because of the COLA clause, that 5 cents a litre will gradually grow to where it eats up almost the full 10%, or the full 10 cents. I don't know what we're going to do after that, but it'll be someone else's worry. So we're investing $1.5 billion over 5 years to support world-class research and development, including through the Canadian Foundation of Innovation grants. Canada has, and the others, Canada has, as a percentage of our GDP, some of the highest investments in research, but we have one of the poorest results in commercialization in that. So we're now putting into some of our research granting an obligation to show where there will be a commercial result, a commercial return on those valuable tax dollars that are placed into there. And if you recall, through the Northumberland CFDC, we were fortunate, I think we were the only CFDC who were able to capitalize on the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math grant that came through the FedDev, the Southern Ontario Federal Development Agency, which has funded about $200 million. And we were able to instigate, and of course very soon you'll see the N100 announcement, and we're hoping to be able to add to some of the great work that our local CFDCs are doing, who receive currently some of the highest funding, the highest funding in their history. We're increasing the tax-free savings account annual contribution to $10,000 effective 2015. Just to let you know, 60% of those who contribute the maximum amount to their TFSAs in 2013 earn less than $60,000, and 7% of those folks are 55 and over. We're reducing the minimum withdrawal requirements for registered retirement income funds. Those two, one was, of course, a platform promise in the 2011 election. The Registered Retirement Income Fund, when we do our budget consultations, many seniors have said, have requested this reducing minimum withdrawals, and we're now delivering on that because many of the seniors feel they need this flexibility. Why? Because our seniors are living longer, and they need to keep those savings that they've made throughout their lifetime last longer so that they can enjoy their later years. We've introduced a new permanent home accessibility tax credit at 15% on $10,000 for eligible expenditures for seniors and persons with disability. We know as we get older, we want to keep our seniors in their home, and we know we want to, through the Accessibility Fund, you will have noticed that we made several announcements to make public buildings and other buildings more accessible for people with disabilities. Also, seniors, in order to keep them in their home, sometimes need to make renovations, widening doorways, putting in ramps, because they need to use walkers, etc. And that's what this fund is primarily going to be used for. And of course, it affirms the tax cuts and benefit enhancements announced in the family tax credit, the universal child care benefit increases and expansions, and the increase in child expense deduction limits. So this graph shows you the reduction in personal income tax since 2006 by family income. And you'll see the greatest percentage of income, folks' income, are people who are under 30,000. And I bring you back to some of the previous budgets where we took over 1 million Canadians off the federal tax rolls. That's 1 million low-income Canadians off the federal tax rolls. And we went further than that. The only tax that these folks would pay would be, of course, the GST, and we reduced it 2%. So these are all included in these calculations, and you'll see the greatest tax benefit goes to the lowest lowest earners. Go further. Getting back to the universal child care benefit, what we've done is we've doubled it. So every single Canadian family with children will now benefit from the universal child care benefit. And that is for children 0 to 5. We've increased that to $1,920 per child, as I said, under 6. And we've now included children from the ages of 6 to 17, $720 per year. Just get caught up here. I'll make some additional notes. So we've extended the employment insurance compensation care benefits from 6 weeks to 6 months. This is another, in meetings in my office and budget consultations, we met with some folks who have had family members gravely ill, some terminally, and they've asked for this benefit, and we are now delivering on it. We're exempting charitable donations. So this is particularly this area for our hospitals, where, of course, raising money. in order to buy equipment for their hospitals, in order to make them more be able to provide services, and so this will go a long way to helping and other charities. But I look at, of course, our local hospitals, because we need to keep them as healthy as possible with regard to their economic status. We've enhanced the Canadian student loans and Canadian student grants. I meet at least 2 or 3 times a year with student organizations in Ottawa, the associations that represent university and college students. So these are 3 of the 4 asks that they had this year. So you can't get everything you ask for, but so what we've done is we've eliminated the in-study student income from the Canada Student Loans Program. We've reduced the assumed parental contribution under the Canadian Student Loans Program, and we've extended Canadian student short-term duration programs. This was a particular ask by the Association of Community Colleges in Canada. Next slide. We've increased the national defense budget by $11.8 billion over the next 10 years, starting in 2017, to support our men and women in uniform and provide them with the equipment they need. Just to, as an aside, anything to do with our Canadian military is very expensive. Any purchases that you make. We have in Northumberland, Quinte West, been the beneficiaries of, well, getting close to now $1 billion in investment at CFE Trent. What has this meant? Well, if you go along the fence around the base, and you take a look at the businesses who are getting contracts to actually to change the face of CFE Trenton, you'll see businesses from Port Hope right through into Trenton. Local businesses employing local tradespeople who are working there and receiving great benefit. Also, I'm hoping, and I know that the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Officer of Port Hope have had several meetings and conversations with the business community in Port Hope, because federal government will be spending $1 billion over the next 10 years in Port Hope to finally put an end to that negative stigma of low-level radioactive waste. So that's $100 million a year that local businesses hopefully will be able to capitalize on and create that and create additional employment in that area. Also, with regard to national defense, we had, after the Second World War, near the end of the Second World War, the world's 3rd largest Navy. We had a ship building capability in Canada that we, quite frankly, over the last years, we lost that ability. So what we're doing now is, and you've read it in the newspapers, and you will hear more investments, we're going to get back our shipbuilding capability. Is that the cheapest way to get or to acquire the ships that we need for our aging fleet? No, it isn't. It would be cheaper to buy from other countries. But what we want to do is regain our shipbuilding capabilities so we can have those high-paying expert jobs to develop our own to regain our shipbuilding capacity, and at the same time look to the future to be able to export that capacity. We're providing $292.6 million over 5 years to our intelligence and law enforcement agent for additional investigative resources to counter terrorism. All you have to do is watch every single newscast in the evening, and you'll see more and more threats. Let's face it, ISIS and other groups like that have declared war on Canada. The RCMP has had to devote, I think it's close now to 600 members to anti-terrorism, and so what we're doing here is being able to enhance both CSIS and the RCMP and other agencies, CBSA, for their counter-terrorism, and hire additional people in order to do that. We're providing $36 million over 5 years to support our cyber systems. If you read the latest, or if you've been watching our Defense Committee and when we discuss the defense of North America, one of the greatest threats, of course, is cyber. And this investment will go a long way to bolster our cyber system to address any threats. And we're investing $12.4 million over 5 years to the Security Intelligence Review Committee. And of course, because of these extra personnel, because of the extra attention being paid to counterterrorism, the Security Intelligence Review Committee, we're enlarging its capability. We're going to ensure that they have a more timely review or overview of the activities of those agencies that are engaged in counterterrorism. So we're balancing the budget. We're fulfilling the commitments that we made 4 years ago to make life more affordable for families by reducing their taxes. Reducing taxes for job-creating businesses. As we know, 90% of the jobs created in Canada are created by small and medium-sized businesses, those businesses that were reducing taxes, cutting back on red tape. We're creating jobs and growth in the, with regard to public transit fund. We've made some announcements, of course, in Toronto, working with the province, working with the City of Toronto. Does that affect us? It absolutely does. A lot of folks from Northumberland do travel to Toronto, use the roads. In addition to that, of course, we've invested in trying to get people off the roads. And one of the ways we've done that is we're improving our rail capability through Via Rail. And in the budget, there's additional dollars going to Via Rail, and we have right here in Cobourg a brand new train station, and we're going to be making an announcement on Monday of how we're going to keep some of the historical part of that building and make it a more enjoyable place in which to catch the train. We've increased the number of kilometers on our rail system so that freight trains can travel in one direction, and Via Rail can travel in the other direction, and we've seen where those investments are occurring right here in Northumberland and Queenie West. And with a view to increase rail traffic, Via Rail is increasing each and every year the number of people who use the rail system, especially those who are going to Toronto. And as I say, Monday we'll be able to talk about some of those statistics and the additional investment that we're making in Via Rail, which is important to the town of Cobourg and Northumberland and Queenie West in general. And we're ensuring the safety and security of Canadians and defending our sovereignty. Oh, I've been told I need to wrap up. So there is a lot more that I'd like to be able to talk to you about, but I feel any questions you may have.
So we're going to have the questions until after Micah's presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All federal budget questions together.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you.
And just before you sit down, Rick, we have a little gift for you. On behalf of everyone here, Northumberland Central Chamber, as well as the Port Hope Chamber, thanks for coming, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
And once again, if you have any questions, you know where to find me.
And now I have the pleasure of presenting Michael Machon, Client Services Partner at BDO Canada's Cobourg office. His clients are primarily owner-operated businesses, individuals, and not-for-profit organizations. He has over 25 years' experience in many areas, including audits, taxation, management consulting, business valuations, and very much more. And I will help you pass those out, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll run through the budget that was presented earlier this week by the federal government. I've been asked to concentrate on the income tax side and highlight some important changes that are being proposed. Rick Norlock touched on a few of those, so I'll sort of skim through them and maybe highlight some areas that might affect people. In the first area that deals with personal tax measures, as Rick mentioned, there's an increase in the PFSA contribution limit, which currently stood at $5,500 a year, which is now $10,000 a year, and that's proposed to kick in immediately. But of course, the legislation needs to go through, and as long as it goes through as planned, then every individual who's over 18 can begin to contribute $10,000 a year. There's a new home accessibility tax credit, which will affect mainly seniors and also people who are not seniors who have a disability. and who currently qualify for what's called the disability tax credit. So the idea is if they make modifications to their home, then they can claim a tax credit of about 15% on the cost of making the change to their home. And that could be things like handrails or maybe making renovations to a bathroom. Really any kind of modification that improves the safety of the home or accessibility. And I should also point out that right now there is a credit that's very similar to that that Ontario has. So provincially, a credit like that exists right now. It's existed for about 2 or 3 years. So really the federal inclusion of that really piggybacks on the provincial one to a certain degree. So it's becoming probably twice as good now. The tax credits about double what they were in the past. Minimum RIF withdrawals. So as we know, when people turn 71, they have to convert their RSPs. They either convert them into a RIF or they withdraw the money from the RSP, which would be quite tax intensive, so probably lose about half of it in tax. So most people convert their RSPs into RIFs, and then once they're 72, they're really forced to draw out a minimum amount every year. And the idea is that that forced withdrawal is intended to basically deplete their RIFs by the time they're in their 90s. Currently, you've got to take out about 7% in the first year when you turn 72, and the government's proposing that be reduced to 5%. So, and then as you get older every year, that percentage increases. And so the concept, I guess, is that people are living longer and they want to provide seniors with the ability to leave more in the RIF on a tax shelter basis than we have right now. And of course, there's nothing to stop people from drawing money out faster. This is only a minimum withdrawal. One area that's really important, I think, for Northumberland County is agriculture. And currently, businesses and individuals who are carrying on farming, there is what's called a capital gains exemption for farmers, which basically means that if they sell their farm property or certain other assets like quota, they have access to what's called a lifetime capital gains exemption of about $800,000 per person. So if you're in agriculture and you sell a farm property, that capital gain can be shelved up to $800,000 currently. The federal budget is proposing to move that to $1 million, and that change would be effective the date of the budget, which would be April 21st. So this really affects our people in Northumberland who are farming either in partnership or as individuals, and that provision is not available for corporations. There's also, a few years ago, the government brought in sort of a penalty provision where for repeat offenders who don't report all their income. So, let's say you get T4 slips or T5 slips, and for whatever reason you don't report all that income on your tax return. Currently, if Revenue Canada identifies that and you're sort of a repeat offender, then there's quite an onerous penalty that's being assessed. And I think it's maybe 20% of what the income was that you didn't report. And the problem with that is that sometimes people may forget to report a T4 slip, and had they included that, the tax that was withheld from their pay may be enough to cover the tax. So actually including the T4 slip may not result in any extra tax at all. But currently, both federal and provincial, they tack on 20% penalty on the gross income, even though you wouldn't actually owe any additional tax. So, and the idea of this repeat offender is even if you don't report a slip for, like, say, $50, then you're thought to be a repeat offender. So the government's changing that, and they're setting a minimum of $500 as sort of the unreported income before this clicks in. And they've also reduced the penalty that if you really don't owe any extra tax because of the missed slip, then you're not going to be penalized. So that's an important thing, because people can kind of fall into that. You know, we have seniors come in, you know, they've got like 25 T5 slips, and they don't really know if they're missing one or two. So it's pretty difficult to gather all that up. Business tax changes. In Northumberland County, we've got lots of small businesses, and so the government's proposing to reduce the tax rate from 11 down to 9%. It's going to be phased in over 4 years. So that should leave more money available in the small business to reinvest if that's what they want to do. But at the same time, they've also announced that if the money is paid out of the company to the shareholders, like to the owners, then the tax rate on the dividends is increasing. So really, the situation is that reduction in tax is really only going to help businesses that leave the money in the company. And but once the money's paid out as a dividend, that tax saving really gets clawed back at the end of the day. So it's sort of a tax neutral thing if the money flows all the way through to the shareholders. But while it's in the company, it's there to reinvest in business and presumably reinvest back in the economy. Manufacturing and processing businesses. So if you're in the business of either manufacturing or processing, right now if you buy manufacturing equipment, you can write off that equipment over 3 years. And that provision is set to expire at the end of this year. And so the budget's proposing that rather than renewing it, what they'll do is they're going to create a separate tax pool for that equipment. And businesses will be able to write off that equipment at the rate of 50% on a declining balance. So this is not as good as what we have today, but it is quite a fast write-off rate. But it's targeted only to what we call M&P businesses, manufacturing processing. So if you're not in those industries, then you've got to sort of follow the new rules. In the area of tax simplification, if businesses are very small and if their payroll withholdings are less than $1,000 a month, so if you've only got, say, 1 employee or 2 employees or whatever, you're only remitting $1,000 a month, then once a business is established, they can move to what's called quarterly remittances, so they only have to remit every 3 months. And but currently, if you start up a new business, you've got to go on a monthly remittance basis until you can kind of prove that you're under $1,000 a month. And the budget's bringing in the idea that even a brand new business, if you expect your payroll to be within those limits, you can start off right away with quarterly remittances as opposed to monthly. So as we all know, there are so many tax issues for small businesses with all the different taxes that compliance is very, very difficult for a small business. We've got sales tax that has to be dealt with. We've got payroll remittances. We've got Ontario employer health tax. For small business corporations, we have corporate income tax, both federal and provincial. We've got WSIB, and the list just goes on and on. We've probably got 5 or 10 different kinds of filings and remittances to make. And for a small business, that's really, really difficult. We've seen cases where it's almost like, it is exaggerating a little bit, but you almost have to hire a full-time person just to deal with all the government red tape and requirements. And they can be quite onerous. If if you're sort of late one day on your payroll remittance, then you immediately get a pretty significant penalty. So for a Chamber of Commerce, we've got lots of small businesses in the area, and anything that can be done to reduce the red tape and to make it easier to comply is a good thing for business. Then they can sort of free up money rather than paying somebody to comply with all of these requirements, maybe they can go out and generate some business and be more prosperous. One other area that affects individuals is there. Probably about 10 years ago, they brought in what's called a foreign property reporting requirement. So if a taxpayer owns what's called foreign property, which could even be shares of U.S. corporations, if what they own is more than $100,000, then they've got a separate tax filing that they've got to make. So, this could be something as simple as owning Coca-Cola in your investment account. So Coca-Cola is a company that is a US-based company. It's not traded on a Canadian exchange. So we've got lots of people who have investment portfolios which include US stocks. And these foreign reporting requirements are quite onerous. So they're proposing to increase the threshold, that rather than 100,000, it's going to be 250. And so for people that are between 100 and 250, they want to bring in a streamlined reporting process that should make it a lot easier to report that you own these foreign assets, and without getting into a lot of detail on that. So, and we are finding more and more people are not, they're not really aware they've got these foreign reporting requirements, and the penalties are pretty severe. If you don't file the form, there's a $2,500 penalty. And it's, people think, oh, I don't have any foreign property. Well, if you own shares of U.S. companies, then I guess you do. And the last item in that area is, we've all heard in the news about governments worldwide cracking down on people evading tax because they move all their money offshore. And so the G20 countries recently agreed that they're going to exchange financial information. So the government's announced that starting in 2017, they're going to implement a system which is going to require financial institutions to report financial information on people that have assets in Canada who are non-residents of the country. So if you've got a non-resident of Canada living in, say, the US, then that financial information is going to be transmitted probably either to the US government or the IRS. And there's a reciprocal arrangement where Canada is going to get information from other G20 countries about Canadian residents who have financial assets abroad. And so this is really all an attempt, I think, to try and catch people who are moving their money offshore. Offshore could be to Switzerland or what have you, and really ensuring that all the taxes that should be paid are paid in Canada. And when you're a Canadian resident, you're really taxed on your worldwide income. So it doesn't matter where you earn the money. If you're a resident of Canada, you're taxed on it. And I think the last point, quickly, is donations involving private company shares and real estate. So right now, if you had, so this is really improving the tax benefits for people who will donate money to charity. And the concept is right now, if you, like let's say you had a business owner and they're going to retire, they're selling their business. So if they sell the shares of their business, they may have a very large capital gain. There's significant tax on that. And they might decide, I don't really need all of this money. I want to donate this to a local charity. So what happens there is they make the donation, they get a tax receipt, so they'll save tax on the donation. But on the other side, they've got this huge capital gain that they've got tax to pay on from the sale. And what they're proposing to do here is basically say, look, if you're going to sell your private company shares, and if you donate the money within a certain length of time, which I think is 30 days or some such thing, then we're actually going to let you you can avoid paying tax on the capital gain, and you still get your donation receipt. So that is actually a huge win. We've got sort of a similar concept right now for publicly traded shares. So if you own shares in a publicly traded company, like Bell Canada or one of the banks or whatever, right now you can donate those shares directly to a charity. Like, in other words, you're not going to sell them, you're going to donate the shares. And as long as those securities qualify, you can donate the securities to a registered charity, and then the capital gain that you would have otherwise had on that is tax exempt. So that provision's been around now for a few years. So basically you avoid the tax on the gain and you get your donation receipt. So it really, for people who want to donate to charities, it's a huge win because they're kind of winning on both sides. And so really the private company shares, I think they're extending that concept to a business owner who maybe is ready to retire and sell their business. And sometimes those capital gains are very, very large. So it gives them an opening for that. So I think we're probably out of time. So thank you very much for listening. And
And so now, if there are any questions for Rick or Michael, I'm sure that we'd be happy to entertain them now.
I have a question for Michael. Michael, you did a fantastic job, by the way. Very, very good. This is very helpful. Could you just, the small business tax, which I understand the concept, because I understand it, this only affects incorporated small businesses, correct?
that's
So the small businesses that, operate downtown and, aren't incorporated, lots of small businesses don't go to the expense or the trouble, as you mentioned about filing all sorts of fun forms. Is there anything in there for the small business chamber? Certainly made up a lot of small businesses are not incorporated.
That's right. So when you're a small business, let's say you're operating a retail outlet downtown or what have you, you really have a choice. You could either be self-employed, in other words, you run the business in your own name, or you run it through a corporation. And if you're running it through a corporation, the corporation is a separate entity and it files separate tax returns, and it's really those corporations that are affected by that reduced rate, which is going from 11% down to 9%. So if you're self-employed and you're not running it through a company, then you're taxed as an individual on that income like any other income. So if you've got income from investments or income from your business or income from a job, it all gets gathered on your personal tax return and taxed at whatever bracket you're in. And so this budget doesn't affect that in terms of business tax because it's taxed as personal income.
That's why I thought I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
I just have one and an observation. Thank you, Rick, for coming, and we'll miss you, I know all the new candidates are here, so we're looking forward to hearing from whoever, but we'll miss you. I work on Toronto Road in Cobourg, and when I grew up, Don't Be a Litter Bug was a giant deal, and Don't Litter. We just participated in the Mayor's Challenge for the garbage pickup. It's disgusting what people are throwing out there. And unfortunately, Rick, you get hit a lot about the letters. We picked up quite a few of yours out there. No, we're just I'm not. It's we don't have the Tim Hortons in the subway, so really, I just wonder if there's a program or anything, and I wish Lou was here too, because as a kid, I grew up being Don't Be a Litter Bug, and litter was a huge thing, and I don't think it is ingrained anymore. And it's really a sad thing for our country and for Northumberland County in particular, because when you drive and the snow melted, it is gross. And I just would like to say, if you can find a way to do something about that, it would be really important to all of us. Dog poop and cigarettes is what Pat's saying, yes. Tricia's saying also, Cigarette butts are really nasty, yes.
Oh. Any further questions? Wow, that's very surprising. Okay, so. All right. So, you know, Rick is still here, Michael is here, the candidates are here. So, as I said, the candidates have their displays set up in the other room. And I would like to thank everyone for attending. I'd like to thank Bree for pretty much pretty much arranging the whole thing. And I would like to, well, thank you for coming and have a wonderful day.